Every year, hundreds of millions of guests visit Disney parks around the world, and they very rarely close their doors. They are one of the very few places that is open 365 days per year to their guests. But there have been a handful of events which have sucked the magic right out of the parks. Here are the top 10 rare instances where Disney was forced to close their doors. Number 10, September 11th, Disneyland and Disney World, 2001.
I'm petrified. I think it's awful. I can't believe that a plane went into the World Trade Center.
The news spread quickly. The fun and fanfare came to a halt at Walt Disney World Resort, and the fastest moving ride was the stream of cars exiting the park as Disney closed its doors.
Every American will always remember the terrible attacks to their nation on September 11th, 2001. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives that day, and 25,000 more were injured. A sudden urge of panic swept across the US after the attacks, and nobody could plan for what might happen next. Disney made the quick decision to close their parks in Florida and California in concern that the resorts were on the terrorists' target list. Disney employees said they were told about what had happened and that the park would be closing. An announcement was made over the public address system at the park saying, "Due to circumstances beyond our control, the park is now closed." The restaurants, snack bars, attractions and shops shut down, forcing the guests into the streets. The employees were then guided to lead the guests towards the nearest exits, and they were advised to not tell guests the reasoning unless they asked. The parks opened as normal the next morning. Number 9, Hurricane Francis, Disney World, 2004. Less than 1 month after Hurricane Charlie hit Florida, Hurricane Francis caused more destruction for the state. Francis caused damage to Florida's citrus crop, closed several schools, airports, and businesses, and cancelled college football games. Francis ultimately caused 50 deaths and more than $10 billion in damages. Disney World resorts in Orlando were forced to close their doors Saturday and Sunday and open back on Monday with a limited schedule. Closing for an entire weekend is costly for a place like Disney, and Francis even occurred during Labor Day weekend. This would normally be one of their busiest weekends of the year, but instead the resort missed out on valuable tourism dollars. Disney World fully opened back on Tuesday and only saw minimal damage. Number 8, Hurricane Matthew, Disney World, 2016. In 2016, Walt Disney World closed its 4 major theme parks, Epcot, the Magic Kingdom, Hollywood Studios, and Animal Kingdom, due to Hurricane Matthew battering the Atlantic coast. Disney also closed Disney Springs, the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex, miniature golf courses, and their 2 water parks, Blizzard Beach and Typhoon Lagoon. They all closed Thursday night and did not reopen until Saturday morning. It's a rare occurrence that Disney closes a park, but Hurricane Matthew had already devastated Haiti and other areas before making landfall in Florida with winds of more than 100 miles per hour. Hurricane Matthew had ripped through the Caribbean, killing hundreds of people. Florida saw 12 deaths from the strong hurricane and more than $2 billion in damages. Number 7, Hurricane Charlie, Disney World, 2004. The arrival of Hurricane Charlie on Florida's coast caused several theme parks to close their doors early for the day, including Walt Disney World. This marked only the 3rd time that Disney World had closed the park to the public, and they quickly reopened their doors the next day. Hurricane Charlie was the first of 4 separate hurricanes to strike Florida in 2004. It was the strongest hurricane to hit the United States since Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Florida was heavily impacted by the hurricane, with 9 direct fatalities, 20 indirect fatalities, and several injuries. Property damage in Florida from Hurricane Charlie exceeded $5 billion. Disney World only saw minor damages from the hurricane, and crews worked through the night in order to have the park ready for their guests to enjoy their magical vacations. Number 6, Earthquake hits Tokyo Disney, 2011. In March of 2011, a devastating 8.9 magnitude earthquake rocked Japan, causing damage to the northern part of the country. When the earthquake first happened, guests of Tokyo Disney and Tokyo Disney Sea were told to shelter in place at the park. All guests were evacuated from buildings and were given shelter in the park's restaurants. Tokyo Disney ended up closing for 5 weeks due to a power shortage that was caused by issues at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The first day that the theme park opened back up, 10,000 guests were lined up early to be the first in the park. Disney still closed the park early that day at 6 p.m. to conserve power, with Disney Sea still remaining closed for a short time. Number 5. Terrorist attacks, Disneyland Paris 2015. Terrorist attacks across Paris took the lives of more than 130 people on November 13, 2015. Suicide bombers struck outside of a football match, several mass shootings took place at restaurants, and shooters carried out an attack at a concert. Ultimately, more than 400 people were injured. Disneyland Paris took action and closed the parks following the attacks. They initially closed due to security concerns and to show some solidarity. The 2 parks at Disneyland Paris, Disneyland Park and Walt Disney Studios Park, remained closed from November 14th to November 17th as part of a national 3-day mourning period. The theme parks reopened on November 18th with normal business hours.
Mesdames et messieurs, en mémoire des victimes de la tragédie survenue à Paris hier, nous vous invitons à observer 1 minute de silence en cette journée de deuil national. Merci. Ladies and gentlemen, on this National Day of Mourning, we invite you to respect a minute's silence in memory of the victims of yesterday's tragic incident in Paris. Thank you. Señoras y señores, en memorias de las víctimas de la tragedia ocurrida en París ayer, nos invitamos a mantener 1 minuto de silencio en este día de luto nacional. Gracias.
Number 4. President John F. Kennedy assassination, Disneyland, 1963. America lost its 35th president on November 22, 1963. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, while riding in a presidential motorcade with his wife, Jackie Kennedy, Texas Governor John Connally, and his wife, Nellie Connally. Kennedy was shot that day by Lee Harvey Oswald from a nearby building. Disneyland in California closed the park the following day in observance of national mourning. Kennedy is known to have visited Disneyland 1 time as a senator in 1959. Number 3. Hurricane Irma, Disney World, 2017. Hurricane Irma made landfall in Florida as a Category 4 hurricane and passed just west of Orlando. Florida saw more than 80 deaths related to the hurricane and billions of dollars in damages. Disney World didn't take a major hit from the hurricane, but the parks did close for a couple of days. The park didn't lose power, but high wind and rain hit the park, causing several trees to fall. Some buildings at the resort also reported leaks following the storm, and several transformers exploded near Disney's Contemporary Resort. The parking areas at Disney World served as a staging area for utility crews working to restore power to the area. All 4 parks at Disney World and Disney Springs reopened to the public the following Tuesday. Number 2. COVID-19, all parks, 2020. The world was surprised by the novel coronavirus COVID-19 that eventually turned into a global pandemic. As of June 2020, more than 7 million people contracted the virus and more than 400,000 people have died worldwide as the numbers continued to rise. Several countries enforced some type of stay-at-home laws, causing most of the world to quarantine at home. In turn, Disney was forced to shut the doors to all their parks around the world. Tokyo Disneyland closed at the end of February, Disney World and Disneyland Paris closed on March 15th, and Disneyland closed on March 16th. After reports came out showing that the spread of the virus was slowing down, all of the parks reopened. Number 1. The Yippie Invasion of Disneyland, 1970. The Youth International Party was a radical counterculture free speech and anti-war group which were better known as the Yippies. In 1970, the group planned a takeover of Disneyland and handed out leaflets for the event. In response, the Anaheim police prepared for the group by undergoing riot training, and every city in the county sent police to help inside the park. Disneyland employees were given certain tasks for the day, and managers periodically walked around telling groups of yippies to be respectful of other guests in the park. Around 5 PM, a couple of groups of yippies headed toward Tom Sawyer's Island, where they invaded Fort Wilderness. They took the opportunity to lower the American flag and raise the Viet Cong flag, and they also sang anti-war songs and got high on marijuana. Eventually, they made their way back to the mainland and planned to storm the Bank of America, which sat on Main Street. After all the trouble that the yippies caused, Disneyland made the announcement that the park would be closing. All of a sudden, from backstage, police began rushing out and they started ushering the group towards the exit. And of course, the yippies were not too pleased about that and began fighting back. The Yippie invasion of Disneyland will go down as an infamous day in Disneyland history for many, many reasons. Find out exactly what happened by clicking the next video.